The topic given to me is, of course, induction of labor in the context of pre-eclampsia and eclampsia. But how do I go backwards?
So to go back.
The first one.
First one.
Yeah.
Back again.
Back again. Okay. But however, I have opted to do this in a more general manner, induction of labor in general, because there are guidelines on this for two reasons mainly. Number one is the overall general perspectives of induction of labor may be of interest to many of you in this audience. And secondly, JP this morning has covered the induction of labor for pre-eclampsia, eclampsia. JP, by the way, is João Paulo. We in WHO, we love acronyms. So João Paulo becomes JP. So induction of labor, the guidelines from WHO gives a very broad overview of what is it, how is it done, why you do it, and why not induction of labor in certain circumstances. So there are WHO recommendations. Of course, the what of induction of labor is known to all of you, and the how is also perhaps very familiar to almost all of you. The why, most of the indications for induction of labor is, of course, if you see the first three, those are quite non-controversial: post-maturity, pre-labor rupture of membranes, and fetal death. Now, eclampsia and pre-eclampsia is so special in terms because induction of labor is a definitive treatment. So there are separate recommendations for that, to which JP has made reference to several times this morning. There are other indications as well. On twin pregnancy, actually, we do not have good evidence. Why not? Why should we not do induction of labor so liberally? And I'm sure many of you would know the reasons why it is not risk-free. Certainly a woman having been undergoing IOL will have a lot of discomfort, and you need close monitoring, and complications can indeed occur, including uterine rupture. So this is the recommendations from WHO. Again, as in the other recommendations, I repeat what JP has said. It is available in all the 6 UN languages, and this is on induction of labor. The recommendations made in these guidelines, they first start with the general principles, and then they go to specific circumstances for induction of labor, the different methods, and a little section on management of complications and the setting for induction of labor in the context of an outpatient setting. Now, before we go to the recommendations, let's just look through at the general principles. So as already implied earlier on, you only do it when it is indicated. You don't do it for no reason at all. So you can read that, and I don't think I need to read that for you. Now, the recommendations themselves, the specific circumstances, those are the ones that the book describes. I have not put pre-eclampsia and eclampsia there because there are separate guidelines for pre-eclampsia, eclampsia for induction of labor. The different methods that they have reviewed and the recommendations made. Now, before I go on to these recommendations, you all would have known from the presentations of many of the speakers from yesterday till today, including JP himself, about we use the GRADE method in assessing evidence. So GRADE, that's what GRADE stands for. And once we have the quality of evidence using GRADE, you evaluate the quality, and then you prepare the grade tables. I will not show the grade tables for all these recommendations because it will be quite time-consuming. Then the strength of recommendations, as Dr. Firoz mentioned earlier on in the previous paper, that sometimes the quality is low, but the recommendation can be strong recommendation, because when we do recommendations, there are other things besides the quality of evidence that gets to be considered. And at this point in time, I'd like to repeat what Dr. Munir Islam said yesterday morning to that question, that the role of WHO is not an individual. The role of WHO is to get this evidence as scholarly as possible, as foolproof as possible, by a team of neutral, independent, international experts, and then we make the recommendations based on the quality of evidence and the recommendations that need to be made based on the different criteria. Maybe these are too small. Now, for the specific circumstances, if you can see, the first one is for postterm beyond 41 weeks. In the interest of time, I will not describe the evidence and the grade tables, but you can see that, yes, it is recommended. It is recommended to do induction of labor for post-maturity. The quality of the evidence is low. The strength of the recommendation is not very strong, it's still weak. So you can go down the list there, and you can see we make recommendations, and you can see that for fetal macrosomia, no, it is not supposed to be done. There is not enough evidence. And for twin pregnancy, the second from the bottom, I use the word none there. By the way, these evidences are sourced from mainly Cochrane systemic analysis. It could be systematic reviews of 20 RCTs, 1 RCT, 16 RCTs, so the numbers vary. So for twin pregnancy, interestingly, there's only one systematic review with just one RCT, and that RCT is underpowered. It is a small sample. It is not a good study. So WHO says we are not yet ready to make any recommendation for induction of labor for twin pregnancy. Now for eclampsia and preeclampsia, not to repeat what JP has mentioned this morning, you know that it is the only definitive treatment and separate guidelines have been presented to you. The important thing here is the timing of the delivery. And of course, this depends on the severity of the disease, whether it's term or preterm. And the severity is, of course, both on the fetus and the mother. This morning, JP mentioned about HIPETET study. So one of the statements from this study is that for mild, let's start with mild first, for mild PET, induction of labor is associated with improved maternal outcome and should be advised for women with mild hypertensive disease beyond 37 weeks of gestation. So this is what I took from the Lancet. Now, we have another guidelines, we call it MCPC because we love acronyms, that is Managing Complications of Pregnancy and Childbirth. Now, in this MCPC, you can read there that for severe eclampsia, severe preeclampsia, you must do induction of labor within 12 hours. And in severe preeclampsia, delivery should occur within 24 hours. So that's all in that separate guidelines from WHO. So in summary, in MCPC, deliver within 24 hours in severe preeclampsia, expectant management with monitoring, you have to monitor if it is mild, and induce if it is after 37 weeks. And the induction methods, of course, these guidelines on induction of labor have reviewed all the methods used, and these are the methods that we use, that I made recommendation. This is for overall induction of labor, oxytocin alone. Okay, you can add prostaglandins when prostaglandins are not available. Vaginal prostaglandins is becoming very popular, but the book from WHO does make a statement that it is more expensive than the other methods and it's not really readily available in low-income countries. Finally, the book, after looking at the specific circumstances and the methods, it does make two other short recommendations on management of uterine hyperstimulation, and it does say that induction of labor is not to be recommended in an outpatient setting. It must be done as an inpatient, in an inpatient setting. Thank you very much. That's all I have to share with you.